September 8th, 2020. 55 days until November 3rd. 55 days until President Trump is reelected. Hashtag Obamagate. Obama is still the most corrupt president in U.S. history. Divider of a nation along race, gender, any attribute or situation. Jill Biden should be ashamed of herself. What she's doing is elder abuse. No wife should ever do this to her husband, who is clearly suffering from dementia. Jimbo John Galt, JimboJohnGalt.com. America is being lied to. A psyops at the highest administrative deep state level, abetted by all the mainstream media, Google, Facebook, Twitter, all conspirators. America is not a racist nation, but they want to divide us. They need their unlimited power back. Donald Trump has disrupted that. They must get their power back. They must unseat President Trump by any and all means. They are being exposed. If President Trump wins re-election, which we think he will, all of their illegal exploits are going to come out. They're not just going to lose power, they're going to lose their freedom. They will continue with their political hit jobs, like the piece in The Atlantic, citing multiple unnamed sources, saying that Trump called veterans losers. They will continue with their riots. The BLM, the Black Lives Matter, the Black Olives Matter movement will continue to be funded by major corporations. Antifa will continue to get a pass. The CCP virus lockdown in the blue cities, allowing riots to go unprosecuted. The Trump racist lies, Russia, Ukraine impeachment, FBI, CIA, all administrative departments are corrupt. Look now, but Peter Strzok, the disgraced fired FBI agent, is on a book tour. He's touting the same lies. That clutch cargo mouth Peter Strzok, disgraceful, still touting the same Russian collusion lies that have been disproven from his own Mueller report. He was part of the Mueller report until he got fired, when his text messages with his lover, his paramour, his adulteress, Lisa Page, got exposed. And Mueller had to quietly shuffle them off into another department, but off of the Mueller investigation. No accountability on that side. You have to wonder, why isn't Barr indicting and arresting all of these corrupt insiders? Why isn't Barr doing his job? What is he waiting for? The deep state is real, people. You've got the Transition Integrity Project, TIP. It's a bipartisan deep state anti-Trump conspirator hit job, which includes Michael Steele, Rosa Parks, and John Podesta. If you're not familiar with those names, Michael Steele used to be the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and John Podesta, he was the campaign manager for Hillary Rodham Clinton. They've war-gamed 4 scenarios, which we've talked about in the past. What it boils down to in those 4 scenarios, if Trump wins, whether it's a landslide or a close call, there will be chaos. They will be in court. They will be in the streets. They will be making speeches. CNN, MSNBC, MSDNC will continue with their conspiracies, the true conspiracy theories. If, on the other hand, Biden wins, whether it's by a narrow margin or a landslide, if Biden wins, they will immediately, every press outlet, even Fox, will be calling for Trump to surrender. They will be calling for Trump to concede. Let's not forget about the Lincoln Project, another one of these supposedly bipartisan super PACs with George Conway and Steve Schmitt. George Conway is the ne'er-do-well husband of Kellyanne Conway, the loyal political strategist to Donald J. Trump. And Steve Schmitt partnered up with George Conway. Steve Schmitt is the most losing campaign strategist in U.S. history. That may or may not be accurate, but he is a loser. The only time he had a winning campaign was the re-election of Arnold Schwarzenegger in California. Arnold had already won. He was the campaign strategist for McCain, a bunch of congressional candidates starting in around 1995. All losers except for the aforementioned Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now he's on MSDNC as he is always slamming Trump. He's the anti-Trumper to the nth degree. Unbelievable. What we have today is more rewriting of history. Let's get one thing out. Slavery was bad. Terrible. Still is. The U.S. fought a war to end it. We amended the Constitution 3 times, way back, starting in 1865. And yet, we live in a racist society where the white man is demonized because of the immutable color of his skin. Black Lives Matter protesters are mostly white suburban-looking women, not the looters. They are greedy opportunists, vandals, and thugs of all colors, But what you see on the news, mostly blacks. The protesters are screaming in your face, white guilt, suburban trust fund babies. They seek to be noticed by their propagandist overlords. They are supplicants who want to feel special in their delusion, hoping they will be granted an exemption for their whiteness, hoping they will be spared from the violence of the mobs, and be rewarded with a pat on the head. Good boy, Tommy. They are the identitarians. They have no soul. Their only identity is of the group. Of their individuality, they are nothing. The big lie starts way back with a guy named Joel Fagan, a white guy. He defines systematic racism, which is what we're living with today. The rewriting of history, systematic racism. In the introduction of his book, Racist America, Roots, Current Realities, and Future Reparations. Reparations is a thing, people. They're coming for it. They've been calling for it for years. People laugh at it, but they're coming for it. It's part of Kamala Harris's package. Their definition, systematic racism includes the complex array of anti-black practices, the unjustly gained political economic power of whites, the continuing economic and other resource inequalities along racial lines, and the white racist ideologies and attitudes created to maintain and rationalize white privilege and power. Did you hear that? The unjustly gained political economic power of whites. Give me an example, but they can't. All they can say is blacks aren't successful, blacks haven't succeeded the way we wish they did, so we're going to blame whitey. Systemic here means that the core racist realities are manifested in each of society's major parts, each major part of U.S. society. The economy, politics, education, religion, the family, reflects the fundamental reality of systematic racism. He wrote Systematic Racism, A Theory of Oppression in 2006, this Joe Fagan guy. They start slow. They drizzle in one little thought, one little seed, and they let it grow, and they keep repeating it. Every now and again, they'll just drop it in. We laugh. We don't push back against it, but we need to. We should have. Back in 2006, back in 2000, back in 1990, we needed to push back against this and slam it hard for the stupidity that this is, because we're living this stupidity today. We shake our head. We shrug our shoulders in disbelief that this is our reality. This states openly that white people, individually and as a homogeneous group, are racist. Every person that has white skin, they imply that whites do it in concert, sometimes without knowing it. See white privilege, that white privilege extension of this nonsense. Biden is continuing the divider-in-chief, as was Barack Obama. He was the divider-in-chief. Biden said yesterday that a black man invented the light bulb. Did he freewheel that, or was it on his teleprompter? Was that planned, or was Dementia Joe, was Hayden Biden going off script and thinking that he was the Joe of old? This anti-white conspiracy has been coming slowly for a while. Back in 1960s, the Supreme Court came out with a ruling that changed everything. Again, slowly. They came up with a term, disparate impact, which blurs the lines of the harm done. If you don't have an intent, you can't be criminally prosecuted. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, a violation may be proven by showing that an employment practice or policy has a disproportionately adverse effect on members of the protected class, that would be black people, as compared to the non-members of the protected class. Just say it, white people. Therefore, the disparate impact theory under Title VII prohibits employers, and this is in quotes, from using a facially neutral employment practice that has an unjustified adverse impact on members of a protected class. If you think it, it must have happened. If you feel victimized, then you were victimized. That's what this says. A Supreme Court. This was actually a Civil Rights Act, but the Supreme Court has backed it up in ruling after ruling, and they've made it worse. It continues. A facially neutral employment practice is one that does not appear to be discriminatory on its face. Rather, it is one that is discriminatory in its application or effect. A lot of things can happen with multiple effects. How did it happen? Could have happened this way, could have happened that way. But if a certain number of black people get affected by something, it has to be racism. Where a disparate impact is shown, the plaintiff can prevail without the necessity of showing intentional discrimination unless the defendant employer demonstrates that the practice or policy in question has a demonstrable relationship to the requirements of the job in question. This is the business necessity defense. In essence, employer has to prove his innocence. This is not the way our system of justice, this is not the way our system of law was created, where you, the defendant, have to prove you're innocent. That is not the way this works, but that's what disparate impact says. If black people complain, white guy has to prove his intent. He has to go back. The burden of proof is on you, the defendant. Nowhere else in history of the United States has that happened. The insidiousness of this policy, of this mindset, is what we have today, what we have as racist police brutality against black men. That is a lie. More white men are killed by cops than blacks, even adjusted for population. In 2019, 1,004 people were killed. Of those, 371 were white, and 236 were black. Of the 371 whites killed by police, 20 of them were unarmed at the time. Of the 236 killed by police, 9 to 15 of them were unarmed, depending on your definition of unarmed. What we have today, from George Floyd, Minnesota, to Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, to the Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta, Georgia, obey lawful orders from the police, and you have a negligible chance of being killed or injured by the police. Don't hit the police. Don't make them tase you, and you will survive. You'll probably be let go. You might get a piece of paper that tells you have to go to court, but you won't be in jail. You won't be in the morgue. You won't be in the hospital recovering from 7 shots because you went for a knife. The Democrats take anything and spin it into white man bad, orange man bad, and that's what they're doing here today. They throw so much crap against the wall to see what will stick that they don't even care how ludicrous it is. The United States is the only nation that does not require an ID to vote in a presidential election. The Democrats are trying to use race once again to get mail-in ballots, live ballots sent to everybody in the country. The idea of voter suppression against black people is a lie. They know it's a lie, but they've been telling it for over 10 years. 4 states, plus D.C., have live ballots being sent at this point. The Trump administration, the Trump campaign, is suing these states to get it stopped. The District of Columbia, California, New Jersey, Nevada, and Vermont, all left-leaning states, and yet they want to control every aspect of it. With these mail-in ballots, anybody that gets them, anybody that lived in your building, in your apartment, in your home, that didn't take the time, and who does, to take their name off the voter roll for that address will receive a ballot, a live ballot that anybody can fill out and send back. 8 states have ballot applications, which is a little bit better, but still bad. Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Mexico, and Wisconsin are automatically sending out to everybody on every voter roll ballot applications, which means if someone is living in an apartment and somebody else was registered to vote from that apartment, which happens a lot, they can take that ballot application and fill it out and send it back in. They get a ballot back. No notarization is required. No ID is required. And all they have to do is stick it in the mail. Voter fraud is real. Look at what's happening in New Jersey. In New Jersey, for a congressional seat, they have to redo the entire vote because of widespread voter fraud. Stacey Abrams in Georgia. This is how delusional these Democrats are, these leftists. She still thinks she's the governor of Georgia. She claims over and over, she thought that she was going to be the Kamala Harris. She thought she was going to be the vice presidential pick of Joe Biden. She was out there. They were doing puff pieces on her, and she continued up until she disappeared off the scene because Kamala was chosen black woman instead of the heavy-set black woman. She was still claiming that she was the rightful winner of that election. Sick people. The left continues all of their lies. They inculcate, they repeat, they brainwash, they gaslight. Russia, voter suppression, nationwide bigotry, even though Obama was president twice. Reparations, statues, orange man bad. All of these lies end up popping up and getting mainstreamed. Look at the hundreds of millions of dollars that the openly avowed Marxist Black Lives Matter, look at how much money they have received from major corporations. The floor of the NBA games, televised worldwide, now streamed, with Black Lives Matter on the floor and on the back of their jerseys. What can we take from all of this? White guilt has been pushed too far. Breaking point for intelligent, go-along to get-along people. Even the people that just want to be left alone have had enough of this ludicrous white guilt. The blacks are overly sensitive to their insecurities, To those screaming racism at every turn, they see racism when none exists. That has to be said. Where was the racism in George Floyd's death? You got a white man, a black man. That does not necessarily make it racist. He didn't use any racial epithets. He said nothing derogatory. All he wanted George Floyd to do was obey his lawful commands. They do this because they know they can benefit from it. Again, if anyone encounters the police, black, white, obey their lawful commands. Do not assault the police officers and try to flee. Yes, officer. Yes, officer. No, officer. You're going to go home and sleep in your own bed that night 99% of the time. The leftist Democrats, the media, they have lied and they will continue to lie as Election Day approaches. Voter ID is not racist. We are the only nation that doesn't have it. Institutional or systemic racism only exists against whites, not against blacks. The system is set up to favor blacks. Affirmative action is codified in our laws. You have to choose the black man that did not do as well as any other race. Harvard's being sued because they're using it against Asians. Again, slavery was bad. Slavery still is bad. Slavery still happens in the African continent. As always, keep your eyes and ears open. Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to speak up for your rights. Never bend the knee. Jimbo John Galt, JimboJohnGalt.com.